This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way. When I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands. When I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl, and today I am joined by Renato Geromel, who is the owner of Geromel Capital and Geromel Construction. So Renato, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Renato and I met, I think it was actually on a virtual meetup the first time we connected, and just one of those things. It was during the height of COVID, I think, when a lot of online networking, still a lot of online networking going on. But that's for me when I started doing more of that. And we just happened to be on the same meetup. And one of us, put out a feeler, put in the chat what we were working on and got connected. We jumped on a call and then we linked up again in Orlando last year. So Renato, excited to talk to you today. So why don't you I'm going to pass it over to you. Why don't you tell us what you're working on these days, what it is that you and your company do, and fill us in a little bit of story, how you got there.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Very nice to be on a podcast with you. I've listened to quite a few different ones from you, so it's awesome to be able to return that. So my passion really is real estate and construction. Like most people, I started in a W-2, went for college to get my construction degree. So I became an engineer, and in both areas, actually, more in the construction side, like civil, structural, and then I also did electrical engineering. So for 7 years, I was in a W-2 and working with different owners, real estate owners, doing ground up construction, being the background. And I started to learn a lot about syndications. I was working for some syndicators on the engineering side and putting some plans together, figuring how the whole thing out. And I always asking questions, how do you syndicate? How are you bringing these investors together and creating this real estate concept that they were doing at a time that I had no idea. And then I ended up investing with some of them. That's how I got started. And just talking more, learning from them, I decided I can make a step and start doing this on my own. So it's been about 12 months now that I left my W-2 and been doing this full time. In those 12 months, like any entrepreneurship journey, it's definitely been up and downs. And I love to share those up and downs because that's how we learn. I learn from other people sharing those up and downs. Since that time, we closed in 3 different deals, syndication deals with partners and all that. I'm originally from Brazil, so I raised capital from mainly Brazilian investors. That's one thing that's like a passion for me. Growing up, I saw my parents not being able to invest in great deals. So that's how a little bit about me. And then now we are working a little bit more in terms of starting our construction side. So whenever you said Geromel construction company, that's a brand new company. Whatever I'm sharing, it's like what I'm doing. So it's nothing set in stone in terms of a fully developed company. This is only 4 or 5 months old. 5 months old company, which is we're still getting licensing and all that kind of things for construction. But my goal within the next 12 months is to start construction on apartment developments.
Oh, it's great. I think that's a great idea or a great plan to have right now. Just with it's tough to find good deals. So can't find them. Maybe then you create the good deals, build them from the ground up. So love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more. So coming from the W-2 world, I'm still in the W-2 world myself. So I always love talking to folks who've just recently gotten out. Tell us a little bit about the process. You were working with some guys who were doing this, but talk a little bit about your first experience, what it was like actually investing in a syndication.
Yeah, I think that's great. That goes right along with the freedom investor, the idea of creating freedom, right? I think that's what most people here listening, that's what they want to create for themselves. And I always had that vision. I grew up in Brazil, so I had very little freedom compared to the freedom that you guys have in US, which is a crazy concept to think about. I had to move from Brazil here to be able to get where I'm at. So freedom was always like my main thing. Whenever people ask me like, what's the thing that you think about the most, and freedom is on top. And whenever I talk about freedom, I talk about freedom of place, time, and money, right? Those three things is what makes freedom for me, because it's different for everybody. Investing on a deal, my first time with some of those folks was really trying to find those three things. So still being in a W2, I was trying to create more revenue for myself per se, and that's one thing I say whenever I'm in a W2, I always trying to create more revenue within the company. And then I was trying to create some revenue outside of the company, and investing was one of them. So I was putting as much money aside as possible. Got to invest in one of the deals that had pretty good cash flow. And my goal on that deal, because I already had my idea was to create something of that for myself, become a syndicator, become somebody that's raising capital from other people. My really goal on that is finding a syndicator that was able to relay with me and be a guide, not only put the money there and forget, be a full LP and a limited partner, but as well get some knowledge from that. And I was able to get that from the syndicator I chose, because I created like a relationship with the team. So that was a great concept. I was able to learn a lot from it, and that was really the goal. And after that first investment, so it's almost a drug. For one time, you want to keep investing and building that capital, and that's what really got me out of my W2. Those initial investments.
Totally. So were you investing in, a lot of W2 employees are investing in a 401k or other retirement accounts, IRAs, things like that? Did you ever do anything like that, or were you always more of the mind that you were going to be investing in hard assets like real estate?
I learned from investing in 401k and investing in the stock market, but today that's just my opinion. I'm not giving any advice here in terms of what to do, what to invest on and whatnot, but I learned from the hard portion. I had everything invested in the stock market. My parents had things invested in the stock market. That's what kind of got me through college here. And then I ended up losing a lot of money that was available for me to go to college. I ended up losing that on, I think it was 2000, just maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's when I started really pushing towards real estate. I had a 401k at the time, and I started losing money at the same time from there. I think we didn't have much knowledge in terms of investing in the market. And I kept putting enough money in the 401k that my employee would match, but they would never understand, because at the end of the year, I'll pull everything out and pay all the taxes and fees and close my account, right? So I put enough money, those 6%, so I would get the match. And then I took money out and paid all the fees and closed my account, my 401k, and took all that money and invested in hard assets. So that's a great question, because not many people do that. They're afraid to pay all those taxes. And I paid all the taxes. I moved everything from that. And it's interesting because I got some investors from my W2 world, my boss and all that kind of stuff. They are very interested in investing. Because I did that kind of thing. So it caught their attention. Like, why are you taking money out of your 401k? We're putting that towards you for you to grow your retirement account. But I knew that real estate had so much more potential.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of good things there that I liked. And when we talk about freedom, one aspect of freedom is having control. And with a 401k, there's not a whole lot of control. You can allocate it into different types of vehicles. But for me, not having a stock market financial background like that, it's all just kind of the same thing. I don't really know what I'm doing there. But with real estate, it makes sense, and you can choose where you put your money, and you do have more control. You can, instead of putting it into the 401k and then taking a tax hit, what I've started doing, which I have done that before, but what I've started doing is just setting it aside, like storing it instead of putting it into the 401k. So I store it in order to invest it into real estate. So that's great. So let's talk about the process of moving from the LP to the GP. Give us your experience with that. You got the firsthand knowledge now of what a syndication is like. You're invested as an LP with an experienced investor. That's how a lot of people get started. That's how I got started. What was your process like with that? And talk about some of maybe the learning, the growing pains you went through, and the mental barriers you had to break through. I know everybody does that when they go to the first time entering into the GP side.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's scary for everybody. It's not a feeling that you're gonna completely get away from. It's just a matter of every single time you're gonna have to just take that feeling and use that on your favor, I would say. LP, you don't have as much control, but you have a group of people just working on your side kind of thing. On a GP side, you have partnerships and things like that, and you're still learning from those people. but you also have to be a leader if you have investors. So I always try to be very, a lot of good communication on a regular basis. I think that's key, not only with your LP team, all your LP team, all your investors, but also all your partners on the GP side. Communication is the key for any of that to have a deal goes smoothly. So that's the key, I would say, to move from LP to GP. There's definitely ups and downs on everything that you do, but that's the game. That's how you play the game.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about you. You were, I think when we met, you were living up north somewhere. Was it Wisconsin, I believe?
That's right, yeah.
And then you moved. So tell us a little bit about the move. I think that kind of took place when you left the W-2 world, right? And you were starting on the full-time real estate investor. What was the reason you did that? And did it have anything to do with being closer to the properties that you're wanting to invest in? Or kind of tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I was living in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's the place I went to school in, got my engineering degree there. And then on the LP side, I was already investing in properties in the South, Florida, and Texas mainly. So I was looking for deals in those areas, mainly in Florida. And then we got a deal in Georgia. That was my first GP deal. And then talking to investors, talking to my Brazilian investors mainly, they always had interest in Florida because that's where they knew. Just they travel, a lot of Brazilians travel to Florida pretty often. So to always be in the lookout for deals in Florida, I ended up moving to Florida. I currently live in Orlando, and we chose Orlando just because it's very central. So we are always looking at deals. Like almost every week, we were going to actually look at properties, tour properties, walk properties. And Orlando is close enough to Tampa, Naples, Jacksonville. It's a day trip. Being very central, we're able to go from east to west and all over Florida within the driving distance. And that's mainly the reason why I moved.
Nice. And you mentioned working mostly with international investors. So I understand being from Brazil, I would imagine a lot of your network is still down there. What's the process like raising capital from foreign investors as opposed to, say, somebody who lives in the US?
Yeah, so the question, for the same way that you have a 506B, 506C, it works the same way. There's definitely a little bit more paperwork for you to do whenever you're investing with talking to international investors. I think the main key is being able to show the vision to them, what's possible. The paperwork is just something that you have to go through. But a lot of people don't understand about the asset class. Apartments is not really available throughout the whole world. It's more like a US thing, and then a few different places are starting them more now in Europe and whatnot. But in Brazil and most of South America, apartments is not really a thing. People buy condos and rent them out, but they don't buy community. So really creating that vision and teaching the investors about it is the key. But then when it goes to the investing portion of it, it's just very similar, just different paperwork. There's a little bit of tax law that we have to go through. So if you are thinking about setting up 6B, 506C, whatever SEC guidelines you're following, just make sure you're talking to your lawyer, attorney about bringing investor capital, because in most cases, if they don't have a US, they're gonna have to, like you as the GP, is going to have to set up a separate account so you withhold taxes. That's one thing. So we try to link our attorneys and accountants kind of together so that they are doing that portion properly. But now that since you teach the investors how to do it and whatnot, a lot of investors ended up creating US entities, and that way they're investing just like any US person.
Nice. Yeah, and I was talking to a gentleman at a conference a few weeks back who was from Colombia, and I thought it was really cool how, I don't know if the situation is similar in Brazil, but the Colombian dollar, there's a high level of inflation there right now. So a lot of those folks were wanting to get their money out of Colombia and into the US. We think inflation's bad, which it is here right now, but it's nothing compared to a lot of other countries. So I know a lot of foreigners are wanting to invest in the US right now. So that's really cool that you're doing that. Let's talk about your construction arm of your company for a little bit. So I know you're just getting it started, but I've been wondering recently about companies that decide to go vertically integrated with things like this. So talk about the reason why you decided to ultimately do this, to pursue this. Again, I know you're still working on things, but tell us about some of the things that you're working on, some of the lessons you're learning as you're doing this right now.
Yeah, definitely. I always had a huge passion into construction. The whole apartment thing is something that I was just not fell in my plate, but I saw great potential into apartments, and that was a second passion. But everything started with construction. So growing up in Brazil, my family, my cousins actually, they have a construction company down there, and they build condos mainly. They build apartments per se, but that gets sold as condos once everything is built up and whatnot. So growing up from a very small age, I think I was like 3 or 4, I was already walking the construction sites and seeing all that stuff happening. So that became really a passion, and that's what kind of guided me to become an engineer and learn more about construction. So that's how we got started. And I was always trying to find ways to incorporate the construction side with the apartment side. We always looking for value add properties till now. I think most people know that there's a great potential in value add because you can push those rents, create a better community, all that kind of thing, and really be able to push the value of the property higher by doing some renovation, some value add. And in construction is not the value add, but you value add the land. There's a lot more potential into that. It's just that there's a lot more planning, a lot more background into to be able to create something that has potential. So I think right now I'm in all that planning phase, talking to a lot of architects, engineers, a lot of the people that I used to be in their shoes to create this potential in multifamily.
Love it. That's great. So I want to pivot a little bit now and talk about networking and the power of your network. Touched on it a little bit here. And as mentioned early on in the show, we met on a virtual meetup, a multifamily masters meetup. So I believe I just put out what I was doing, what I was looking for, and I'd love to connect with anybody. And I think you were the only one that reached out for that meeting. And so that's how I know somebody's serious about networking. It's not always comfortable to get out and just talk to somebody that you haven't met before. It definitely takes some reps before you do get comfortable with it. But I can tell you personally how it's been extremely important for me. Tell us about your experience with networking and how important it's been for your journey so far.
Yeah, definitely. To tell you the truth, I'm terrible at networking. Okay. I'm terrible at it. I force myself to do it and there's different methods to network, right? There's those guys that are very outgoing. They talk to everybody. And there's the sniper guys. I'm the sniper networker. I think there's great value to network with a bunch of people. I think there's people that are great at it and they can talk to anybody. I try to really pick on specific people that I could bring value. I think that's the key. Not really finding people that can bring value to you, but finding people that you can bring value to them. And that relationship is going to be created much stronger. Of course, we're always looking for partners. We're always looking for investors, but mainly more than the money from investors or just like a regular partner, just a common partnership. We want something that can withstand. So for me, the sniper networking setup has really worked. And I really look for people. I think that's how we start talking. I think I saw that you were creating something that was very interesting, had value. I think I knew you were going to create something great. And I can see that you're doing that now with the whole rebranding and all that. I really enjoy people that are within the game. And usually I'm able to pick those things whenever I meet them by just being able to ask questions and find a relationship or a common, something that we can talk to one another and relate. And it's what has worked for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things that I would say about networking is that it's not as bad as it seems once you get into it. And it's okay to just stand there for a few minutes. If you're in a group of people, and I say this from experience because I've done a lot of it over the past couple of years, and a lot of people think I'm a huge extrovert, but I'm not. And before all these networks, it's a chore to get myself to go to these things a lot of the times. Like, for example, last night I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting just to network with other business owners. And I kid you not, I just stood outside the event, like walking by, acting like I was on my cell phone. Just, how am I going to go in? And finally, I just forced myself to go in, and I ended up having a great time. Just got a drink and hung out for a minute, and people start coming up. You see somebody else that's standing by themselves, you go talk to them, and it's just putting yourself out there and being relatable and talking to people and just trying to get on the same page with them. So it's huge, just getting to know other people and figuring out what they're doing.
Yeah, I've been in that position many times. And you're just like, if you know you're that way, maybe you find other people that are that way too. Maybe that's why we connected. It's just people with common ground. Everybody wants to do something bigger, and you have to be able to communicate to create that vision. So networking is just part of it.
It is. It's just part of it. Exactly. So what is something that you wished when it comes to real estate investing? I know my journey has taken longer so far to get to where I'm at, and I'm still not anywhere near where I want to be. there's many lessons you pick up along the way. Is there anything that stands out in your mind that you wish you would have known right when you got started that maybe somebody else who's getting started right now could get some value from?
Yeah, definitely. There's always something that you think you could have done different, right? Especially as you go along the path and look back and you're like, well, you don't want to regret anything, but there's after you learn something, you always want to do something different. So for me, definitely, I wish had started earlier. Everybody wish have started earlier. But if you think about yourself in 10 years from now, you look back and you're like, okay, I started in the right time. But don't wait to get in the game. If you're listening to this, you know what the game is. So take action, I would say. A lot of people are caught into I gotta learn something else. I gotta learn something else. And I am guilty of that as well. There's a lot of times that I don't push myself harder because I think, oh, I don't know enough. I'm not gonna talk to the investor because I'm not fully capable necessarily. But hey, everybody is learning in a way. Nobody knows everything. And you can always learn something new from anybody. So I go from that aspect, try to create that relationship, try to build that connection. But looking back is really on, wish I had started earlier, and then finding a very specific niche. So whenever if you're looking at apartment buildings, don't try to look at everything. Use that sniper setup as well. So now we know exactly what we're looking at. We know that, hey, we want this location, we want this many people on the surrounding areas. The revenue has to be this much for so many miles around the property. We know how many units, we know the size of the units. So everything is very detailed. We get a bunch. I didn't have many deals before, but now we get a bunch of deals in our emails, and I can very quickly point out, okay, this is worth underwriting and move forward with to look if it's going to be a good deal or not. And then we can get rid of a bunch of other ones. And at the same time, whenever you're networking or talking to brokers or anything else, it seems like you know better what you're talking about because you're so niche that it gives more confidence, not only for your networking, but your investors as well. So
yeah, absolutely. The niching down and the more specific you get, it just simplifies everything. You don't have to look at this deal that comes into your inbox if it doesn't meet your specific criteria. Don't have to look at it if it's not in your specific sub-market that you're interested in. Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. And another thing I would ask that's helped me is just realistic expectations. I think, in fact, I was having coffee with the gal this morning about talking about real estate, and we were just talking about how, man, it just takes a lot longer than originally thought when I got started in this space. I thought that like the Grant Cardones and Robert Kiyosaki, and you think that, hey, I'm going to be like them. And then you realize they didn't just get started doing this yesterday. And real estate is often not a get rich quick scheme. So think long term and surround yourself with the right people and niche down. Love it.
yeah.
I want to talk about your secret sauce. So I know you're a humble, but what do you think that you've done differently than others to be able, a lot of people would love to be working for themselves, real estate investor, quit the W-2 job. What do you think you've done differently than others to get to where you are today?
Back when I was in my W-2, I think the key was storing capital. I wouldn't say saving, but storing, being niched into what you're going to do with that capital. I was very good at that, I would say. I was able to store a significant amount of capital while I was in my W-2 to be able to invest and really have enough confidence that my cash flow on those investments is going to pay for my ongoing bills and all my expenses. I think that was the key thing. So on my W-2 side, for me to be able to move on with that was the key. And the thing that going along with that is always being able to provide value. In my W-2, I was always trying to provide value. I had a W-2 that was somewhat related to investments. I was working for educators now, and I was always asking them, hey, how can I add value so I could learn? So that was another thing. I think that helped me quite a bit. And then now, after going away from my W-2 and being focused on real estate investments, just having a specific niche, just knowing about construction and being very, very passionate about it has definitely been something that I'm proud of and something I'm using in my favor, I would say.
That's great. I love the phrase storing capital because so many people now, especially the millennials, the people you get the job, start making some decent money, and then you need to kind of show off the importance of living a simple lifestyle and storing that money instead of spending it on useless items that are vanity metrics like the cool car, the cool clothes, the cool watch. If you can store that money and invest it in a cash flow producing asset, then you can increase your lifestyle and get to that point where you can leave your job and focus your time and energy on the things that you enjoy doing more. So I love that. All right, Renato, time for one more question. It's a question that I ask all of my guests. It's related to what we're talking about here, quitting your job. So for a quick background, I work at Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant on the central coast of California. It's set to shut down at some point in the next couple of years. Originally it was 2025, and now they're talking about extending that. But my plan is still to be out by 2025. So what is your one piece of advice you would offer to folks who are looking to escape the W-2 world and pursue a life of investing in freedom? No, we just talked about it, but let's hear it one more time.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say finding that niche, I think that's key. Don't necessarily wait. Some W-2s may not allow you to move, especially if you're in the financial world. It's a little bit harder to raise capital and all that. But find a way that you can get, I would say, don't wait for you to get out of your W-2 to get completely involved. Some people has that learning paralysis. I got to learn everything. And I mentioned that. I think getting into the game is the key. You're already listening to this, listening to more podcasts and whatnot. You're getting that knowledge. Now, don't wait to put that knowledge to work. You learn something new, get that in action. I think that's the key thing. I started by investing my LP. I wish I had got more in action when I was in my W-2 already. So I think continuing that, taking action is really the key. Finding ways for you to get involved and bring value to find somebody that's looking for something that you can provide, add value to them. Maybe you can get in a deal by just something that you do already in your W-2, and you can provide some value to get some of the knowledge to them, or you can link them with people that are interested in investing or raising capital or managing deals, whatever that may be.
Solid. I love it. So Renato, if people want to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so the best way for you to reach out, I would say, would be my Instagram. I have my personal Instagram, Renato Geromel JR. That's probably the best way. I'm pretty often in there and posting on, talking to people. I have an Instagram, not a more business one for my Brazilian folks. That's Geromel Capital. That's all in Portuguese, but I'm also in there. So if you want to Portuguese and want to check that out, that's in there. And I'm also in all social medias platforms. That's the same base. That's really the best way to reach.
Excellent. We'll make sure to link all that stuff in the show notes. So ladies and gentlemen, Renato Geromel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.